All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and get started, and I can introduce our panel series today, if that sounds good to everyone. And yeah, if more folks come in, I will, one of us or the co-hosts will let them in, and we'll just get jumping in. Sounds good? Thumbs up. It's not as easy to thumbs up on Zoom as it is on Teams. On Teams, it's just like a full-on party of emojis, but on Zoom, they make you work for it. But I'll imagine the thumbs ups are coming in. Amazing. I see them. Awesome. Well, hi everyone. Hope you're having a beautiful Tuesday. Welcome to the welcome to the fourth panel in our climate conversation series featuring the Starfish Canada's top 25 environmentalists under 25. Just a note that today's session will be recorded. I've already hit record, so you're not going to hear the infamous recording in progress, but this is me telling you, recording is in progress. So if you have a preference to keep your camera off, that's totally fine. That's just going to live on our Starfish Canada YouTube eventually. So for those of you that are new to the Starfish, we are a nonprofit organization that empowers youth voices through our national journal and amplifies change through programming and education. The Top 25 program is an embodiment of passion and forward thinking. We award 25 young environmental leaders with not only physical awards for their dedication in environmentalism, but also provide them opportunities to continue to grow. This is one of those opportunities. So another cool opportunity we provide to our top 25 speakers, our top 25 winners, is Speakers Bureau. If you're interested in booking one of our speakers to speak in a panel like today, or as part of an Earth Day celebration, I know that's in the past, but any other celebration moving forward, or even as a keynote speaker, you can take a look at our extensive list of speakers and their topics of interest on our website. Our six-part panel series will feature our 2024 top 25 winners and will cover various topics, including sustainability, reconciliation, colonialism, policy change, and much more. We're so happy to have you join us today. Woohoo! Inserting emojis here. Before we get started on the panel and introduce our amazing panelists, I wanted to acknowledge that the Starfish Canada's work stretches across the homes of many treated, unceded, and unsurrendered Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit communities in what is colonially referred to as Canada. I'm joining y'all here today from Lekwungen territory in what we colonially refer to as Victoria, BC, represented today by Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. If you feel comfortable doing so and want to, you can drop in the chat where you're joining from today as well, so we know a little bit more about who are these little faces behind the rectangular boxes. But after that, I just want to welcome you to today's session, Digital Activism. Our speakers will be speaking in the language of their choice today, either English or French, and so please set up closed captions with your preferences. I will drop the instructions in the chat if it's not already there. Either me or Esther will. Great. So just giving you a second once that appears in our chat to set up closed captions. There it is. Perfect. Awesome. I'm going to introduce our panelists as you take a second to set up those closed captions. So the first on our panel is Victor Xu. And Victor is the founder and president of the Green Society, a global nonprofit that delivers climate science and education and organizes initiatives like climate fiction writing contests. He also co-founded Future Ed, which has educated over 500 students through a network of 70 plus tutors and advises on environmental policies at the local level. With research on solar technology and numerous accolades in climate science, Victor is dedicated to empowering youth and fostering global environmental change. I'm trying to send the celebration emoji to that, but it's just too hard. When you try Teams, it's just an emoji party. So, oh, there we go. There we go. Thank you. Little cheers. Perfect. Thank you so much, Victor, for being here. So our next panelist is Lily Yang Liu. Lily's a passionate student, social media educator, and advocate focused on human rights, climate change, and education. She actively participates in global discussions on climate policy, representing organizations like the United Nations Association of Canada and engaging in events such as COP29. Locally, she contributes to her school's Environmental and Sustainability Council and is developing a climate curriculum for elementary schools to improve climate literacy. Wow, that's amazing, Lily. Really cool work that you're doing. So, sending you the excited emojis as well. Then we have Luke Wynn. Luke co-founded Operation EcoPin, a youth organization dedicated to environmental service initiatives like recycling, supporting local food banks, and promoting mental health through plant growth. He's currently a first-year student at the Bachelor's of Health Science program at Queen's University and aspires to pursue a career that blends human health and environmental advocacy. Awesome. Those are amazing panelists. So, woohoo, thank you for being here. And I also think either me or one of my team members, we're going to spotlight you so we can see your face and screen bigger than everyone else's. Thanks, Lily. You were the first one, first one to be spotlighted there. Perfect. I think all of our friends are here in the spotlight. And also just want to take a second to say too, now that I've introduced our panelists, I'm Claire Marshall, by the way. Oh, I really hit my chest and said that. I'm Claire Marshall. I'm the social media and community manager here at the Starfish. In case I don't think I've had a chance to meet most of you folks in our panel and people that are maybe joining today. If you don't know me, social media is what I do. So I was really excited to help moderate this panel and just take part in this conversation. So really appreciate people being here. And appreciate you panelists, especially for being put on the spotlight, which that feels like it's a lot of pressure, but it's not a lot of pressure. We just have a few questions here that I'll start getting into. So yeah, thank you for being here. Let's jump right in. We're going to share our main questions for the panelists in the chat. And if we have time at the end, we'll open the floor to any questions. I invite you to sit back, take in what these youth leaders have to say. And if any questions or comments come up, please feel free to use the chat function and we'll get to the questions at the end. Okay, so without further ado, our first question is misinformation and greenwashing are huge challenges in the digital space. How do you navigate and combat misinformation, particularly around environmental policies, sustainability, and climate science? So we can take a second to think about that. And yeah, if you just want to unmute yourself to any of our panelists, you can jump right in. I know it might be scary going first right away, but if, yeah, maybe just take a second and we'll let you have a go at an answer.
I guess I can go first. Okay, so I first want to just quickly define greenwashing. Um, I think, in my opinion, greenwashing is essentially when mostly corporations and companies, but in general, when a false impression is conveyed, where unsubstantiated claims are made about, certain products that they say are environmentally sound or friendly, but really um, do not achieve the desirable outcome that they advertise it to be. So, and this is often in the form of digital content, and in the form of different, advertisements in the media. So I think that it's very important to combat this, especially because I feel like climate literacy is very important now. For example, in my school at least, there are no climate courses, there is no climate science education, and we do not have access to that, and we're not taught that in school. So what I've been doing outside of school is in my organizations running the curriculum and the courses to educate students who are interested in learning about the climate and environmental issues in general, and that really helps to combat greenwashing. I also think in terms of misinformation in general around environmental policies, sustainability, and climate science, I think a lot of the times when schools do try to talk about climate science, and this is typically in, for example, science class or something, they generalize a lot of knowledge and there are a lot of misconceptions. For example, a lot of my peers and classmates assume that renewable energy sources um, are very beneficial, other than the fact that they are costly and less efficient than, conventional fossil fuels. But I think they fail to understand the fact that First of all, there's many different types of renewable energy sources. Most of them are intermittent, and a lot of the times, schools don't go into too much detail about specific types. And like the even the science behind it, if it's being taught in a science course or something, we just say renewable energy sources do not run out and are good for the environment, and therefore we should implement it. But we don't really see the full picture, and this, I believe, is a form of misinformation, or at least we're not getting educated on the entire topic. So I feel like green greenwashing and misinformation can be combated if we have better climate literacy, which is what I'm trying to do currently with my organizations.
That's an awesome answer, Victor. Thank you so much. And yeah, it's definitely, it's interesting. There's been such a draw towards like climate, digital marketing, and it just becomes almost, yeah, just like words that you see. Sustainability is just something that some brands throw in just like to get you to maybe buy a product. And so it's really important that education aspect, like you were saying, to just actually know what it is you're buying into, which can be hard sometimes on online spaces because yeah, people just don't always have the time to fully like educate themselves on what a certain product is really getting at. So that's why companies I think can get away with it. So education's such a big part of that. And thank you, Victor, for being for helping people that are in your corner better understand renewable natural energy and just all of the different work that you're doing. Appreciate that answer. So thanks. And if any of our other panelists want to follow up with what Victor said, I can repeat the question as well. So misinformation and greenwashing are huge challenges in the digital space. How do you navigate and combat misinformation, particularly around environmental policy, sustainability, and climate science?
I'm so sorry. I've been sick the past like month, so my voice might cut out. But yeah, I would love to go next. Yeah, to me, Victor, thank you so much for talking about climate education. That's a huge passion of mine, and it's so crucial and important. I'm very excited for the BC government that they're finally doing something. But I think the thing about misinformation online is, yes, it's a very big hindrance towards our goals of climate advocacy. But the first thing for me is to recognize where this misinformation really comes from, and I think I know that most of the information that comes online is from big fossil fuel companies, polluters, people who, have that agenda for their profits. They have this incentive to spread information. We know that these companies spend millions of dollars every single year to put these like false, misleading content on social media. And oftentimes these social media posts are designed to be very polarizing. So we want to engage with it and argue with it because, that they induce such like strong emotions, especially for people who care a lot about, climate change. So I think the first most important thing for me is to not engage with these things because, by engaging with it and arguing with it, you're just fueling it and allowing it to reach more people, particularly people who might not be as educated as you on matters of like climate change and might not understand. And we know that these posts, they delete comments. So most oftentimes your comments will not even be seen. It will just fuel the fire. And to me, something really important is, fact checking. So I do my own individual fact checking for every single thing I post on my social media. I run a thing called Daily Climate News, and it requires a lot of fact checking. So I have to double check different sources. I don't just rely on one singular source. I have to make sure that there's multiple people reporting it or understanding where it comes from. And that has been really helpful for me to both learn about policies, but also ensure, my content is not spreading misinformation.
That's a really good answer, Lily. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's just it's really good to hear from another climate advocate like you in this in the headspace that you don't have to engage with everything you see. And in fact, like your advice was, don't engage and don't give more attention to some things that we do find on the internet, which is it's easy to say maybe, but it is also hard to do in practice. sometimes when you see things that are just downright, wrong. And yeah, like I've had to learn over the past few years that there's a certain amount of learning that people have to be ready to do to like actually hear an opinion that's different than their own. And a lot of people on online spaces aren't curious and willing to do that learning. So it's good advice to just, use your energy where your space or take up space where your energy will be valued. And that's what I heard from that answer. So thank you, Lily. Luke, did you have anything you wanted to add to that conversation on misinformation or greenwashing?
Yeah. So, I would say that it's important to understand first that misinformation tends to spread like very quickly online, and especially because like in terms of climate change and the environment, just because it's such of like a volatile subject. So, for example, during the 2019 wildfire season, there were a lot of social media posts that blamed fires on environmental policies or exaggerated damage or to downplay like climate change. And so I think in general, we just need to normalize sharing accurate and science-backed information from trusted academic organizations. So, for example, the Canadian Climate Institute or a major university like University of Toronto. And we need to make sure these sources we are using these sources that are factual, have academic backgrounds. And I think another really vital component of teaching people to combat misinformation is teaching people how to critically think and evaluate what they see online. So most people are generally not trained to be able to tell the difference between reliable information and fake news. So like there are a lot of like misleading climate change videos on platforms such as YouTube, and they use a lot of outdated information to confuse people about Canada's role in global emissions. And so we need to be able to promote media literacy uh, and generally show people how to check facts. And there are some uh, relatively easy ways to do this. For example, one way you could do this is in their CBC actually has a fact checking section that you can check out. Just to make sure that what you're looking at is is trustworthy and it's actually true. And so to make sure that you're not being misled.
Yeah, Luke, that's such a good point, and something I think is even more important these days to how to have better technology and media literacy and that kind of like analytical skills to think about something you're seeing and like how real it is. And I think it's something moving forward, like in this world where AI is like part of our everyday life. It's part of social media. It's just like heavily integrating into our technology more and more. It makes me feel very what's the word? I'm just hesitant to believe almost anything at this point in time with generative AI and things like that. So maybe that will like make people feel a little bit more inquisitive about things that they see on the internet and wanting to like fact check in the future. One can hope that could be the light at the tunnel. So thanks for sharing that. We're gonna get going on the second question here for our panelists today. So there's often a debate about the effectiveness of digital activism versus on-the-ground action. How do you balance online advocacy with real-world engagement? And how do you think one is more important than the other, if you think one is more important than the other?
Yeah, I guess I can start off this question again. So, in my opinion, I think that of course both digital activism and real world engagement are very necessary and both can be very powerful. Online platforms allow us to reach more global audiences. For example, like how Fridays for Future, they shifted to digital strikes during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that mobilized so many people despite the lockdowns. But I also think that digital activism is not enough by itself. I think that on-the-ground action is very important as well. When I was working with some students in climate education, I realized that, and this can also be said for just Zoom classes in general. There's not much of a connection when it's over in an online platform as compared to a like actual in-person human connection that you have when you're doing on the ground action. And I think that's particularly important for environmental work because the most important thing about environmental work and environmental advocacy is that we can all unite to fight this common problem, common issue that we all face. It's not like separated by nations. It's not separated by any certain boundaries because the entire planet will feel the effects of climate change, and therefore we all need to unite together to come up with solutions for this global crisis. And I think that a lot of the times the and I think this will be built on in the next question, but I think a lot of the time, many of the communities that are most impacted by climate change are the marginalized communities, such as indigenous communities and those in the global south. So I think that those areas typically, well, they might have less access to digital, the digital world, and since they have less access to the digital world, on the ground action is a lot more effective. And I think what's important is that we provide our resources to them by connecting with local groups in their region who are better and more familiar with their needs. We connect to those local youth advocacy groups who can then in turn help those in marginalized communities who are facing the effects of climate change a lot more than other groups around the world. And a mix of digital activism and on the ground action is always going to be very beneficial. I don't think we can have just one. On the ground actions such as like simple cleanups, ravine cleanups, recycling campaigns, those are all very important. But the digital activism will allow us to reach a larger audience and actually promote that, have more people who are able to view these campaigns and actually participate in them. Because in the end, it's about a collective effort, and the more awareness we can raise, and the larger the reach of our audiences, the better it is to combat this challenge. And that's where digital activism plays a really important role. But overall, I just think like digital campaigns are important when individuals have access to the internet. In more marginalized communities where internet access may be limited, it's important to have this on the ground action, especially since human connection and, for example, connection to the earth in indigenous culture is so important. Digital activism itself doesn't provide that. We need the hands-on approach, and we need on the ground action, particularly from local groups in those regions to facilitate that communication with marginalized communities so they also feel included in the development of our solutions.
Wow, Victor, it sounds like you've like written a report on this on this topic. That was a really good answer, and definitely something I agree with. You know, digital activism, it may start online, but it definitely needs to create that like kind of rolling ball or snowball effect of actually getting down into communities doing the actual work, like river cleanups and all those really good examples that you said. So thanks so much. Any of our other panelists, Lily or Luke, want to contribute to what Victor said?
Yeah, I agree with Victor, and like he said, I think that digital and on the ground activism are both really important, and they play important roles in creating the social change that we need. And uh I think the key is really finding a balance between the two because both approaches are effective in different ways. And I'd say they generally have a different role. So the main, I guess, boon of digital activism is that it offers a unique platform to reach large audiences quickly. Because social media and blogs, online petitions, and whatnot can spread awareness really quickly, so almost instantly, which is why it's extremely valuable. For example, you have the No Dakota Pipeline movement in Canada, which opposed the Dakota Access Pipeline, and that actually got international support through social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook. And it's really useful for being able to rally people from all around the country and all around the world. And that's not really something that can be done purely through on the ground activism. But the main importance of on the ground activism is that you can use it to establish concrete change. And so, for example, I think like Victor mentioned, the Fridays for Future climate strikes uh, had over 500,000 people marching. And that actually brings a lot of physical visibility. And I think that's also an extremely important role. It turns something that you can build up online into something that is actually tangible.
Yeah, I agree in large parts with what both Victor and Luke said. Digital activism holds a very special place in my heart because I started off, doing social media. That's how I started the majority of my climate work, and I still do it. And it has been very, very powerful in, funding my on the ground work with the workshop. I'm really lucky with grants, but also by being able to build a pretty large community through social media. I was able to get a lot of funding and a lot of resources. So it's helped a lot with on the ground action. But I also think that digital action, action can have tangible impacts. I don't think it's just merely superficial. I do daily climate news, and I believe I've seen like how it can impact people's interest and understanding of climate change. And I don't think it's just my platform, definitely not. There's a lot of really, really great organizations that do digital activism, that do, infographics that have a lot of engagement and reach a lot of people to, yes, it spark tangible action, but just generally increase their level of climate literacy. They go very hand in hand, and I think both spaces are equally important.
That's great, Lily. Thank you. I'm gonna have to make sure I follow your local climate news. Is that on social media on Instagram or YouTube, or where is that series?
I'll talk about the next question. It's
Okay,
perfect. Yeah.
perfect. I was jumping ahead. Awesome. Well, with that, I'll read out to you folks the next question. So, how can climate activists ensure that their digital campaigns are inclusive and reach marginalized communities affected by climate change?
Yeah, I would love to talk about this. This ties in a lot with the work I do. Yeah, a lot of people ask me, where do you post your videos? And I actually posted through mainly Chinese social media, and there's a very particular reason for that. I also posted in Mandarin, so it actually like reaches, Chinese speaking audiences in an authentic way, and they can easily understand it. And the reason is because, I'm quoting this from Climate Cardinals. They said that 90% of climate research is published through English, and a lot of time there isn't translations for that. And I wanted to spread it into, the community where I grew up. And that was why it's so important to me to do it in Mandarin. So that's how I at least try to reach communities that often are not targeted with climate news, because the Chinese government, their relationship with climate change and greenwashing is very iffy, and there's a very long history of that. And we don't see a lot of climate activism in Chinese social media spaces. And I'm trying, well, I don't think I'm filling the void in any single way, but I think I'm trying, and I've done it for the past 5 years. And I'm really lucky to have found an audience, and the audience is still growing, and it's consisting mostly of children and also their parents. So I believe it's making an impact.
Lily, that's great. Thank you so much. And that's a really interesting statistic about the 90% of climate research is kind of given in shared in English language. So definitely gonna keep that in mind. I think that is a really important topic to bring up, just like the inaccessibility, not only of just like accessing the information, but even being able to like understand how it is presented to you. So that's really great work that you're doing. Thanks for sharing that. I would love to hand over to Luke or Victor if you want to follow up with that question.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with everything Lily mentioned. And just to build off of that, I think we often hear that climate change like affects us all, but in fact, it doesn't affect us all equally, and that's where injustice comes in. And many communities, they're losing their homes due to climate change from rising sea levels, while others are like debating policies regarding like air conditioning and air conditioned rooms. And this is really a significant problem within the larger problem of climate change. And actually, I think 80% or roughly 80% of the climate impacts are felt by the global south, and countries in the global south, for example, like very small island nations such as the Maldives they contribute less than 1% of emissions globally, but they're at risk of disappearing very soon as they are very small islands that are harmed by rising sea levels. And many people are also pushed into extreme poverty due to climate change in the past few years. So I think that to be more inclusive and reach these marginalized communities that are most affected by climate change in our digital age, I don't think like a hashtag or a post, a viral post is enough to do that. Because we need to consider who's being heard and who is still left out of the conversation. So I don't think we can fight climate change with just one lens or one digital platform. Um, and that's where where I mentioned before, like the action on the ground comes in. But I also think that when you truly connect with local groups or local environmental advocacy groups in the regions of marginalized communities, which I mentioned previously, it really allows you to get a sense of the experiences that are faced in those communities and how you can help. And then you can create impactful strategies to address those issues. For example, with my organization, I was creating a climate curriculum, not just for students here in Canada, but also a curriculum tailored for Indigenous peoples and schools located throughout Kenya, Africa. And that really allows them to get the same access to the same education, but tailored to their specific needs and to the challenges that they're facing wherever those might be. And I think another really important thing we've been doing is we've been trying to mentor individuals in marginalized communities on certain research topics. And personally, I did some scientific research on renewable energy and solar energy specifically. And I think that the most important thing about research is different perspectives because different perspectives is what drives innovation. And when you get the perspectives of those who are directly impacted and threatened by climate impacts, they're able to come up with the best solutions, the most effective and the most direct solutions to those problems they're facing. Those solutions are also going to be the most practical because here we don't really experience as much of the impacts of climate change as they do. So our solutions might not be tailored directly to what we really need. So bringing that research mentorship to those communities, I think is really important. And not only does it include those marginalized communities, but it also allows for the entire world to benefit as they're going to develop very effective, tailored solutions for many of the global climate problems that we will be facing very, very soon.
Wow, Victor, again, that was a really good answer. And thank you for sharing that and connecting it back to your own personal work in climate advocacy and providing access to education. Yeah, I think that a lot of decisions are made without people that are most impacted by those decisions in the room present at the time of those decisions being made. So it's a really good point to bring in and just like making sure that as we work to combat the climate crisis or even just adapt to this world that we're living in, including people whose lives are most impacted by those decisions is a key player. Luke, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
I think Victor and Lily covered a lot about what I wanted to say, but there are some stuff that I also wanted to say. So I'd say on the basic level of digital campaigning and the spread of information, we have to make sure that this is all accessible to all communities. A lot of audiences might not have like the same technology or like internet speed, for example. So we have to be able to use a variety of platforms to reach these different audiences, whether it's mobile friendly formats, radio stations, or partnering with community organizations that already have trust and connections in those areas. And also just on the very basic level of having content in multiple languages makes it a lot more accessible for marginalized communities. Uh, Additionally, I'd say that representation is extremely crucial in creating inclusive digital campaigns, because marginalized communities need to be able to see themselves reflected in climate activism, whether through the issues highlighted or uh, the people featured in campaigns. And so if you ensure that these communities are at the forefront of climate campaigns, like uh, activism can ensure their voices and concern are represented and heard. So it generally just makes campaigns more inclusive and therefore a lot stronger.
That's great. Yeah, Lou, thank you. Way to tie, parts of what Lily and Victor had to say together into that answer. So really appreciate that, folks. We're going to move into our, I think, final kind of organized question, one that we had already planned out, and leave time a little bit if we have other folks have questions that maybe you can ask our panelists that if you would like to. So our final question we had prepared is, what strategies can digital activists use to overcome online fatigue and keep people engaged in long-term action?
Yeah, I just want to first say climate burnout is so real. I had like a whole mental breakdown at COP because it felt like nothing was being done and it was not great. But I was really lucky in that I had a community around me, and a lot of climate burnout can stem from, digital spaces because we're so, well, I'm very active online. I like to doom scroll, and I imagine some people here are too. So there's a lot of very depressing climate news and imagery going on. It's very polarizing, especially with this election season. Wow, I can't believe election just happened yesterday. It's crazy. So, but to me, I actually learned this from a friend. I started posting daily climate news. It was like, wow, this is happening. It's such a scary time right now. And then she looked at my videos and she was like, Lily, this is great, but this doesn't give me hope to want to do something. And that's why I do two things in my videos now. I do a thing that we want to work on, and a hopeful thing, a good piece of climate news, because there's a lot of really, really cool activists, like activists here in this Zoom room right now, who are doing amazing work and working on climate solutions. So it's very important to highlight not just the very, very bad, but also the good things happening, even with things like cute animals. Show cute animals. That keeps people initially interested. They look at your content and they learn more about, what you're trying to share and the messages you convey. And last thing is to have really tangible steps you can offer them. I do this series like recap thing every year where I'm like, wow, this is 2025, 25 ways you can engage in climate activism. And I do like a countdown. It's really, really fun. And people sign up and they take photos of them doing the actions. So yeah, make it fun, especially for young people, like children. I work with a lot of kindergartners. So how do you make this fun? How can you make, climate activism very interesting? And a lot of that comes through like play, especially when you're younger.
Lily, that was such a good answer. Just like really, really good summary of how I also feel and like relate to my work in the digital space. And just like you said at the end, the play really is for me at least the answer of just like what happens when you feel totally hopeless. Like you just look at cute pictures of animals, or for me it's like things with hobbies and art, like get inspired, even just like turning it off and going out and doing something, or just like you said, having an action. Like anytime that I do an action that shows that like things are not all out of my control, that there are things I have direct control over, it gives me that like, I don't know if it's like serotonin or whatever, that like chemical boost of like, okay, like you're doing what you can. So I think that was a really good answer, Lily. Thanks. Luke and Victor, anything to add on, yeah, what strategies you can use to overcome online fatigue?
Yeah, so I completely agree with Lily on the fact that um, it's really easy to get tired out when uh, you're creating content that generally was not even creating content really. It's just when you're talking about things in the world that are quite frankly pretty depressing. So I think what it's really important to do is to, instead of framing this climate crisis as just something like, we're all doomed and doom posting and whatnot, we should frame it as an opportunity for positive change through like new creating new job opportunities through green jobs or sustainable innovation. And I think that just having that positive spin on it is really good at keeping people motivated. And I'd say that on the topic of people keeping people engaged in long-term climate action in general, it's really important to build a sense of community and solidarity. Because in general, especially for online activism, online spaces can be very isolating, even though you are kind of interacting with a bunch of other people. Uh, you're obviously not really interacting face to face with this and face to face with them, and so there's not really a personal connection there. And a lot of people might experience slacktivism, which is where you feel like you've done enough by liking a post or signing a petition without actually engaging in meaningful action. Don't get me wrong, like that stuff definitely helps, but uh, so it has to go beyond that a lot of the time. And so to overcome this, we have to, I think it's a really good idea to create larger groups on platforms like Twitter and Instagram, and hosting online events where people can have interactive discussions and where we can connect people with different backgrounds in order to share ideas and experiences. And I think this can really help to foster ongoing commitment to any cause that you're trying to promote.
Thank you, Luke. Yeah, that's a good point on slacktivism. I've never heard that word, but I'm gonna remember that now. And it is definitely a trap of being like, oh, I reshared something today. I elevated like a message, like that's it. Yeah, really, really good point of just encouraging people to go beyond that like simple reshare, like, or just like amplifying message and trying to go back to what Lily said and like take actual action. Victor, is there anything you wanted to add about digital activism and like how to avoid online fatigue?
Yes, I definitely agree with everything that's been said by Lily and Luke, and I definitely agree that it's important to have a positive outlook on the situation, even though a lot of the news out there, a lot of events can seem a little bit pessimistic or depressing at times. And well, I think digital fatigue is definitely very real, and most of the times even as like an organizer, even when I'm organizing certain climate initiatives, I can feel overwhelmed by the constant stream of climate content. And so I can only imagine what it feels like for the people who are doing actual work and the hands-on work, for example, or participating in everything. So I think there are a couple of ways, at least for me, that I think would be helpful to combat this. And in terms of digital content, relying solely on one digital platform can lead to burnout. If I'm like scrolling through a social media, for example, if I'm looking through Instagram for a while, then it can lead to burnout for sure, and I need to switch to another platform. So by diversifying like presence across various channels, then not only can we keep the message fresh and not cause burnout, but we can also reach different audiences and groups of people. I also think diversifying initiatives, such as for my organization, I initially had a writing contest, but I think after running that for a few years, I decided to have an art contest as well. And diversifying those initiatives also helps a lot. And I think mental well-being is very important. I remember writing an article about eco-anxiety and climate anxiety. This is a very prevalent issue in our society today, and many individuals, particularly youth, can feel the impacts of climate change and feel very anxious about our future. So it's very important to raise awareness about that as well and offer potential solutions. And sometimes when even if the progress might not be a lot, recognizing and celebrating minor progresses in the right direction can provide motivation and remind individuals that progress is being made, and that can spark some hope because I've learned that people often stay engaged when they feel hopeful, they feel connected, and that they're contributing to something that's truly meaningful and making a change. And then lastly, and most importantly, I think that storytelling is very impactful and powerful because when you have like authentic narratives that you can resonate deeply with, then you can really inspire others to take action and stay committed from a personal standpoint. And many studies have actually shown that climate change narratives, structured as stories and storytelling, are a lot more effective in inspiring pro-environmental behavior than if you were just to throw like a fact out there. And sometimes you can also connect certain things in activism to real world events that are happening day to day, and that also helps spark interest. But yeah, so overall, I think one of the things that I've been doing is um, mixing in like stories of youth change makers and bringing other youth change makers and guest speakers, notable environmentalists to certain webinars that I've hosted with my organization. And I think that really not only does it bridge the intergenerational gap, and that's really important for individuals to understand that generations that doesn't matter because we all need to come together because we're fighting a common problem. But also when young individuals who are participating in these webinars, they hear the stories of other, whether it be older professionalists in the field and environmentalists and advocates, or they hear from other change makers who are roughly the same age as them, they feel inspired that it's possible to make a change and that even if it's if it's a small difference they're making, it really matters and it really contributes to a larger goal that should be contributed to by every single person in order for it to actually make a real impact. So I think just being able to diversify your engagement channels, prioritizing all the mental well-being that is involved, celebrating the small wins and sharing all the personal stories and connecting different individuals together, can definitely help to overcome online fatigue, when we look to combat this climate crisis.
Wow, Victor, I'm gonna look for the react button so I can make sure you have a heart for that response. It was really good. It was very detailed. And yeah, just dropping some really good advice about sharing wins, personal storytelling. Yeah, those are like all things that for me in digital spaces feel really happy to see as well. So I really share that and amplify that response. Okay, I think we're looking at, I'm on the West Coast, like I mentioned, so we're looking at a cool 4:49, 4:50 p.m. For if you're ET. Looks like it's getting closer to, what is it, 8 p.m. So we've got a little bit of time left. If there are any questions in the chat, feel free to send one in. I'll give you like a minute or so to ask our panelists questions. And yeah, we'll see if any pop up in here. And if not, maybe I have a couple that I can throw one out there and maybe we'll have time to get to that before we close today. So I'll stop talking for just 1 minute in case anyone has questions they want to drop in. Okay, if no one does, you still have time, but yeah, I'll go ahead and just like ask mine. And I think it does tie really into that fourth question, kind of about fatigue, but maybe just like with a little bit of a different twist. Yeah, I'm just curious as someone who also is like, my title, I was in like climate advocacy before I came into my work at the Starfish, and I did my own work on my own social media to kind of talk about the environment and share news stories and messaging around like how we could be better climate and environmental advocates. And so that was kind of my like personal online identity. And whenever I came into this work at the Starfish, well, it became my actual job as a social media manager to like amplify messaging for youth climate activists. And so all that is to say is that, digital media is something that is what I do for a living. And then it's also something that I am obviously passionate about as coming into it was already like making YouTube videos and making reels on Instagram and TikToks, etc. So that being said, I'm just curious with you folks, our panelists, like how do know whenever it's time to turn it off, if that makes sense. Like, how do you know it's time to just look at cute videos? Like for me, I like to look at like skateboarding videos. I like skateboarding. And so, but sometimes it feels, bad that I'm not like actually, I'm just doing silly things on the internet. So I'm just wondering if y'all have any advice for people that are in digital activism spaces, like when is it okay to just take a step back from activism? And I don't want to be a slacktivism, but when is it okay to just walk away for a second, if ever, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think whenever you recognize that, you're burning out, it's the right time for you to like take a breather, go, I guess touch some grass. Touching grass really helps me. Like I live in BC and I'm really lucky to have a lot of nature really close to me. But when I'm like really tired and I just can't with the social media comments at this point, the election going on, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna go touch grass, or I'm gonna look at cute dog videos or like squish my dog. It really helps. So honestly, the thing that really shaped the way I think about this is like a tired, burnt out you is not going to help the climate movement, right? So, a happy, rejuvenated you will do so much more work at a much faster pace than, a really tired person. So it's so important to recognize that, you are also a person and you deserve to have breaks.
That's a good answer. And I think our dogs would benefit from that answer as well. Thanks, Lily. I'm also going to jump in and ask. I see in the chat we have a question. How can young people navigate the education system when curricula is not designed with climate misinformation in mind? So we have someone who'd love to hear thoughts on that.
I think I can speak to that point. I think that's a really good question because as a high schooler myself, I definitely feel that our educational system does not support the current needs of being able to be educated and have good climate literacy, which is very important for developing solutions. In terms of how young people can navigate the education system when this curriculum is not designed to be, accurate and have the full picture in mind, I think the most important thing is to have the initiative to do like your own research because a lot of people are not, they don't have the initiative to go outside of what's taught in the educational system or what's taught in school and look at their own or teach themselves something and look at sources by themselves, read a research paper, read an article, and really interpret that, analyze that by themselves. So I think having that initiative is really important. And for me, what drives that initiative is some like passion. If I'm passionate about something, I remember when I was doing research on like solar energy, I was very passionate about this topic. So when I was listening to lectures, I attended lectures by professors at various universities, and they were telling me information on various research projects that they had worked on in the field of solar energy. And you would think that that gives you the entire picture of solar energy and its capabilities. However, oftentimes the educational system, even at the university level, may include misinformation or at the minimum not have everything that you're looking for in mind. So, what I did was I spent lots of time reading research articles on my own, research papers on my own. I also looked at articles and specifically I spoke to professionals in the field, those who are actually developing the methodologies for making solar cells and improving on their efficiency. And I think that that really helped because it gives you a variety of perspectives, not just from the academic side, but also from the industry side. And more importantly, it gives you the ability to self-learn things to and the ability to research because I think research is really important. Research drives innovation and the solutions that we're looking for. So when you have the initiative to learn something by yourself or look beyond what's taught in the classroom or traditional education system and really go in depth into it doesn't have to be a lot of topics. If it's one topic you're very passionate about, you go very in depth into that topic, you can really learn a lot of things that you won't typically get in traditional education curriculums.
That's great. Thank you, Victor. We have one more question that maybe we can jump to real quickly in our final few minutes. We have a question from Malika. I was wondering how you cater your messages and what strategies you would use to get it to the right audience, specifically with that digital activism lens. Does anyone want to have a little go at that question?
For me, in the beginning, it was a lot of trial and learn, but then I've been doing it for quite some time, and you start seeing patterns in, specific hashtags and also specific times you post your content, so that it really varies per platform. So this is a difficult question to answer because there's so much variance. But yeah, I definitely start looking for patterns. At some point when I was like younger, I had this sheet going on, tracking the patterns to figure out when I could like most effectively reach the audiences I want, because I'm trying to reach parents and kids going to school. So when are they most likely to be on social media? It was a little bit unhinged, but I think it really helped at the end.
That's great. If there any panelists have anything they wanted to add, no pressure. That's perfect. Okay, well, why don't we start wrapping this up? I know it might be late if any of y'all are more east than the West Coast right now. So I just wanted to take a minute to remind you folks that, oh my gosh, I have to keep checking I'm not on mute. That's my worst fear is I'm like talking and I'm on mute. Um, anyway, so we have our snack and learn on Thursday at 9 a.m. PST or 12 p.m. EST. And we would love for you to come out and join us in conversation as well, especially just because it gives us more of a space to have like more, not one-on-one, but just smaller group conversations versus this kind of like panel style discussion. So we'd really love to see you there and to tell your friends too. They didn't have to be in this event to come to that snack and learn on Thursday. So join me for my morning coffee and our panelists for whatever it is they're having at their snack and learn, and hope we can see you there. And I just want to say a big thank you to our panelists for everyone coming to see today's panel. Registration for our next panel will open in early May, so please do keep an eye out for that. And as you leave the Zoom session today, you'll be prompted to answer a quick survey. So please take a few minutes to give us your feedback. We'd really appreciate it. And we hope everyone has a great night or afternoon or evening. Yay. Thank you all so much. It was so good chatting with you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.